It was just a normal day at school. We were all sitting in Mrs. Dawson's history class, staring at the clock, waiting for the final bell. Then, out of nowhere, the intercom crackled to life. "Students and staff, this is a lockdown. Please follow protocol immediately. This is not a drill." At first, I thought it was just another drill, but when I saw Mrs. Dawson's face tense up, I knew something was wrong. She rushed to lock the door, turned off the lights, and motioned for all of us to move to the back of the room. We did as we were told, but a nervous energy filled the air. The school felt off, too quiet. Usually, even during drills, you could hear something: muffled voices, footsteps, distant sounds. But this time, nothing. Just an eerie silence hanging over everything. Minutes passed, dragging on endlessly. Then I heard it. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, right outside our door. My heart started pounding. I could see a shadow moving past the thin strip of light under the door. Then came the knock, light at first, then harder. "Let me in," a voice whispered. It wasn't a teacher's voice. It was low, raspy, and completely unfamiliar. Mrs. Dawson put a finger to her lips, signaling for us to stay quiet. We barely even breathed as the handle jiggled. Whoever was out there was trying to get in. Then suddenly, more footsteps, this time faster, urgent. A voice called out, louder, "This is Officer Reynolds." Step away from the door. Silence. A few tense seconds passed before we heard the sound of running footsteps fading down the hall. More voices filled the air, officers shouting commands. But we stayed frozen. Something felt unfinished. Then came another sound scraping, like fingernails dragging across the door. It was slow, deliberate, and far too long after the running had stopped. Someone was still there. Mrs. Dawson clenched her fists, her breath coming out in short, panicked bursts. The scraping stopped, and then breathing. Deep, heavy breathing, just beyond the door. My skin prickled. I could feel it, as if the air in the room had thickened, suffocating us with fear. And then, laughter, soft, barely audible at first. But then it grew louder. More erratic. It wasn't normal laughter. It was unhinged, broken, something that didn't belong in our school. "Let me in," the voice repeated, this time with a sickening glee. We heard another voice down the hall, another officer. "We have eyes on him." Then a loud bang gunfire. Screaming, the school alarm system blared, but we weren't sure if it was part of the lockdown or something else entirely. Everything felt chaotic, unreal. We clutched each other, trying to stay silent despite the terror threatening to overwhelm us. More gunfire. Running footsteps, shouts, then finally silence. We didn't dare move, even when we heard a key in the lock. The door swung open, and an officer stood there, face pale, sweat beading on his forehead. "It's safe now," he muttered, but his voice lacked conviction. Minutes later, we were led out of the room. The school felt different. The place we had always seen as safe was now terrifying. Officers were everywhere, checking rooms, questioning people. As we stepped outside, I saw clusters of students, some crying, others just staring blankly, trying to process what had just happened. Later, we found out that a man had entered the school through a propped open back door. No one knew what he wanted, but security cameras caught him roaming the halls, trying different doors. When the police confronted him, he ran. But the strange part? When they caught him, he was laughing uncontrollably. They said his eyes were wide, unblinking, like he wasn't even fully present. They never told us who he was, what he wanted, or why he kept whispering, "Let me in." The next day, everything changed. The doors that had once been left unlocked were now secured at all times. Security guards patrolled the halls, but none of that erased what we had felt in that moment, the terror of hearing those slow, deliberate footsteps right outside our door. I still hear them in my head sometimes, even now, and I don't think I'll ever forget that whisper, "Let me in." But the worst part? 2 days later, I woke up to a sound in my own home. A knock at my bedroom door, light at first, then harder, and a whisper through the wood. I was in the school bathroom during the quietest part of the day. It was right after lunch break, and the halls were mostly empty. Students were either in their classes or outside, but I had stayed behind to use the restroom. I washed my hands, preparing to head back to class, when suddenly the school's PA system crackled to life with an announcement. "Lockdown! Lockdown!" At first, I thought it was just another drill. The school did lockdown drills a few times a year, and this one seemed like just another routine. But then the sounds from the hallway, footsteps pounding, doors slamming, told me something was off. It wasn't the usual drill chaos. It was real. People were panicking. I froze. I looked at the bathroom door, hoping it was just a drill, but the screams and heavy footsteps grew louder and closer. It wasn't just chaos. Something was happening, something far worse than a simple drill. I grabbed the bathroom door handle and pulled. It wouldn't budge. I shook it harder, trying to force it open, but the door was locked from the outside. My heart began racing. I glanced around the bathroom, empty, alone. I could hear distant screams and frantic footsteps echoing through the hallways. Panic was setting in. I took a few shaky breaths. "It's just a drill. It's just a drill," I muttered under my breath, but even I didn't believe myself. I pressed my back against the cold tile wall, listening for any sign of what was happening outside. There was no clear explanation, only fear. Then the lights flickered. The low buzzing noise from the overhead lights was suddenly unsettling. It was as if the whole building was alive, trembling with tension. My breath hitched as a chill ran down my spine. This wasn't normal. The chaos outside grew. I could hear people shouting now, not just running. They were screaming in terror, calling out for help. Then the noise stopped. Absolute silence. A deep, unsettling silence that made my heart pound even harder. I crept over to the small gap under the bathroom door, looking through the crack. In the dim light, I saw shadows moving in the hallway, figures walking quickly, but no one came near the bathroom. For a moment, everything seemed eerily still. Too still. I stood frozen in place, my mind racing. What was going on? Why weren't they checking the bathrooms? Was I the only one still trapped here? My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I quickly pulled it out, but the screen was cracked, and it was dead. I cursed under my breath. I was completely alone. Then I heard it, the sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate, like someone was moving toward the bathroom. My body tensed. Whoever was out there wasn't rushing. They weren't running like everyone else had been. They were taking their time. A shadow stretched beneath the door. A figure was standing just outside, almost as if they were waiting. My heart pounded in my chest. The figure didn't move, just stood there, blocking the light from the hallway. My throat tightened. I backed away from the door, clutching my stomach, trying not to make a sound. My mind raced with possibilities, none of them good. What if they were here for me? Suddenly the door creaked. My breath caught in my throat. The figure outside was forcing the door open, just a little at a time. With each inch, my heart felt like it was about to explode. The door was almost fully opened now, and I couldn't help but stare at the crack, waiting for whatever came next. Then the door swung fully open, and there, standing in the doorway, was someone I didn't recognize. The figure had a blank expression, but their eyes were cold, empty. In their hand, they held something shiny, something that gleamed in the dim light of the hallway. A knife. My world felt like it was crumbling. The door was wide open now, and the figure stepped forward. I was frozen in place, unable to move, unable to scream. My mind went blank. My body was locked in fear. But as the figure took a step toward me, I knew I had to do something, anything. I screamed.
Help me!
A desperate, guttural cry for help. My voice echoed through the empty hallway, but it felt so distant, so alone. The figure didn't flinch. They kept moving toward me, slowly, deliberately. And then footsteps. Fast, loud, rushing toward the bathroom. A voice shouted something I couldn't make out, and the figure turned abruptly, disappearing down the hall. The next thing I knew, teachers and security officers were pulling me out of the bathroom, guiding me to safety. My legs felt weak, my mind numb. That night I lay in my bed, staring at the ceiling. The soft glow of my bedside lamp was the only comfort I had. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that shadow under the door, the blank expression, the gleaming knife. The panic in my chest never fully faded. Weeks passed, and I still woke up in cold sweats. I could hear my own scream in my nightmares, feel the weight of that suffocating fear. The school eventually reopened, students returned, but I never felt safe again. Every lockdown drill made my heart race. Every sudden noise made me flinch. I survived. I got out. But that moment in the bathroom would never leave me. It would haunt my dreams forever. The gym was loud with the echoes of bouncing basketballs and sneakers squeaking on the polished wooden floor. I was in the middle of a game with a few friends, our laughter and competitive banter filling the space. The doors to the gym were open, leading to the main hallway where the occasional student passed by. It was just another normal day until the speakers crackled to life. Lockdown, lockdown. This is not a drill. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. For a split second, the entire gym froze. The coaches exchanged confused glances before snapping into action. Everyone against the wall, now. One of them shouted. The gym doors slammed shut. As we hurried to the far end of the room, pressing ourselves against the cool cinder block walls. At first it felt like a mistake, like maybe someone had tripped an alarm by accident. But then came the sounds from the hallway, running, shouting, screams, real, terrified screams. "What the hell is going on?" whispered my friend sitting beside me, his knees pulled up to his chest. No one had an answer. A loud thud echoed from outside the gym doors. Something or someone had hit it hard. My breath caught in my throat as another slam followed. "Coach," someone whispered. The coach held up his hand, signaling for silence. My heartbeat pounded in my ears. Then we heard it. A voice, muffled but clear enough to send chills down my spine. "Open the door." It wasn't a teacher. It wasn't the principal. It was a student. And something in his voice was completely off. We stayed silent, barely breathing. A second later, another bang against the doors. Harder this time. A panicked voice from the hallway shouted, "He has a knife." My stomach dropped. I saw the fear reflected in my friends' faces, in the coach's clenched jaw. The person outside, the one trying to get in, wasn't just looking for safety. He was the reason for the lockdown. A scream rang out, abruptly cut short. Then footsteps, fast and heavy, running down the hall. Coach moved fast, grabbing the emergency key from his lanyard and locking the gym doors. We pressed even closer against the wall, huddled together. Someone was crying softly. I clenched my fists, trying to steady my breathing. Then the worst sound of all, the gym door handle rattled. Whoever was outside was trying to get in. The rattling turned to pounding. The entire door shook as they slammed their fists or their body against it. "Open the door," the voice called again, but this time it was calmer. Too calm. "I know you're in there." No one moved. No one spoke. My hands were shaking. I felt my friend grip my wrist, his fingers ice cold. Then silence. The pounding stopped. The footsteps faded away. For a few long, unbearable minutes we sat frozen, waiting for something, anything to happen. Then came the sound of distant sirens. Police. Help was coming. Coach took a deep breath and whispered, "We're getting out of here." He moved quickly, motioning for us to follow. The back exit of the gym led straight to the parking lot. If we could get there before whoever was in the halls saw us, we'd be safe. One by one, we crept toward the door. My heart felt like it would burst out of my chest. Coach slowly turned the handle and pushed the door open just enough to peek outside. Then he waved us forward. We moved fast, sprinting across the pavement, the cold air biting against my skin. Just as we reached the edge of the lot, I heard shouting from behind. I turned my head and saw him. A boy, maybe a junior, standing at the doorway of the school. His clothes were disheveled, his face twisted in something I couldn't fully understand, rage, fear, something else entirely. And in his hand, the glint of a knife. Before he could move, a deafening voice boomed through the air. "Drop the weapon." Police officers had swarmed the front entrance, their weapons drawn. The boy hesitated, his gaze flickering between us and the officers. Then he dropped the knife. He was on the ground within seconds, restrained, shouting something we couldn't hear. My legs felt weak, but I kept running. We didn't stop until we were far from the school, far from everything that had just happened. That night I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. My hands still shook, my body still tense. I kept hearing the pounding on the door, the voice calling out. I knew it was over. I knew we were safe, but deep down I also knew I'd never forget this day. Never. The next morning, the school sent out an email. The student responsible for the lockdown had been expelled. They never told us why he did it, never explained what had pushed him over the edge. Maybe they didn't know. Maybe they didn't want us to know. But I had a feeling I did. He had been obsessed with her, my girlfriend. She never liked him, never led him on, but that didn't matter to him. In his mind, I had taken something from him, and that was enough to make him snap.